Hello everyone, and welcome back to the Tent of Abraham. I'm Tamir Kreisman from Jerusalem, Israel, and we continue with Pirkei de Rabbi Eliezer. We're in chapter 39c. We're almost done with Joseph, and this one is called Codebreaker, Translator, Sustainer. Hallelu et Adonai kol goyim shabechu kol haumim ki gavar alenu chasdo ve'emet Adonai le'olam hallelujah. Of course, as always, all the Torah study that we are doing, all the prayers that we are doing, everything is for the protection of our soldiers. They are right now the greatest tzaddikim in our nation. They are putting their lives quite literally on the line to save everyone else. And all your guys' prayers from wherever you are around the world, every time you say Tehillim, every time you learn Torah with the intent that this is to protect the soldiers, you are now creating angels. Like we said, you are creating angels, and these angels are protecting the soldiers. We've shared some of these incredible, miraculous stories with our group that no other army in the world could say that these angels are actually coming and saving them in the manner of which is happening to our boys now. Absolute miracles, just miracles, okay? Somehow the bullets find their way exactly where they need to go. Just like back in the day with Jacob, that one of his arrows would find two bad guys, right? Boom, it's okay. They move on their own. That's okay. We do our ishtadlut. God is going to hit the target for us. So again, this and all the studies and all the tefillot, all the prayers that we're doing, thank you so much for sending it towards our boys. You are now participating in the defense, mamash, the defense and the protection of Israel. So may God bless you the way that you are blessing us. Let's get into it. It was worthy that 12 tribes were to stand from Joseph. Not the 12 tribes as we know them, but an additional 12 tribes of potentially equal value, right? As we said in the previous class, that Joseph was a spitting image of his father Jacob, right? Not only did he look like him, but he acted like him as well. Hence, in his image after his own likeness. This is what we saw, for instance, the first time we saw this, we saw Adam from the aspect of Elohim, right? The super spiritual aspect with the ability to create, the ability to destroy, the ability to govern. Also, we saw this from Seth to Adam, not from Cain and Abel, because they didn't look exactly like Adam did. In fact, Cain looked more like the serpent, right? So we saw this from Seth after his father's likeness, his image. The same thing from Isaac to Abraham. They were pretty much identical twins almost. And then we saw the same thing between Jacob and Joseph. Okay. So this is also hinted in Genesis 37:2. These are the generations of Jacob when Joseph was 17 years old. But how does it say? How do we say it in Hebrew? Ele toldot Yaakov Yosef. Again, the meaning is simply not even there in the English. As what should have been written is, these are the generations of Jacob, Joseph. End of story. That's it. Sorry. Sometimes the mustache goes up the nose. The toldot, the lineage of Jacob, was Joseph. The continuation of Jacob was Joseph as he continued his father's ways, essentially becoming an extension of him. And so it was only fitting that, like Jacob, Joseph would have his own 12 tribes. And by the way, this was also the case with, like we said, with Abraham and Isaac. The bond between father and son also was so strong. It needed to be that strong in order to become triumphant during the last trial of Abraham, the 10th trial of Abraham, not including the 11th, which we discussed. Isaac was a spitting image of his father Abraham, both in the physical appearance as well and in his deeds, meaning likeness and image. Granted, both sets of fathers and son, each individual had his own distinct personality, as well as their own embodiment of the Sfirot. We have Chesed and Gvura and Tiferet and Yesod. So, what happened with Joseph? Now bear with me, okay? We're going to read some weird things right now. The seed of 10 tribes came out of his fingertips, as said in Genesis 49:24 during Jacob's blessing of his sons. Vateshev be'itan kashto Vayafuzu zero'ei yadav. So let's read the English and not understand anything. But his bow was strongly established, and his arms were gilded from the hands of the mighty one of Jacob. For sure, that says it there. Okay. Vayafuzu zro'ei yadav. The word vayafuzu can also be understood as vayafutsu, which means to scatter with screams, as we could read in Numbers 10:35. Vayehi bin So'aron, we say this every time we open Aron HaKodesh in Shul. Vayehi bin So'aron, on Shabbat. Vayehi bin So'aron, Vayomer Moshe Kuma Adonai Vayafutsu Oivecha Ve'anusu Mesanecha Mipanecha. So it was, whenever the ark set out, Moses would say, "Arise, O Lord, may your enemies be scattered." Vayafutsu, may they be scattered, and may those who hate you flee from you. So again, the zro'ei yadav, zro'ei, zroa is, yes, it is an arm, but zira'ei is the seed from his hands. So again, the seed of 10 tribes came out of the fingertips, and only 2 remained, meaning out of the 12, and they were Menashe and Ephraim, right? His actual children. The woman brought false accusations against him, and he was confined in prison for 10 years. Now, I just want to read these last 2 parts to you in Hebrew because the whole thing rhymes beautifully, and I have no idea if it was done on purpose, nevertheless. And this is from Pirkei de Rabbi Eliezer. V'nishtayru shnaim Menashe ve'Ephraim, ve'evia alav haisha alilot dvarim, ve'nechbash bebeit ha'asurim 10 shanim. So, what I just read in English, that's what I just read in Hebrew right now. 2 remained, Menashe and Ephraim. She brought accusations against him, and he was confined in prison for 10 years. It just beautifully rhymes in Hebrew. So how many years was Joseph in prison? 12 years. Very good. 10 years for the 10 tribes, and another 2 years because he put his faith in man and not God, as he asked the cupbearer not once, but twice, to remember him. In Genesis 40:14, Ki im zechartani itcha kasher itavlach va'asita nai madi chesed vehizkartani el paro ve'otzetani min habayit hazeh. But remember me when things go well with you, and please do me a favor and mention me. Vehizkartani lehazkir and lezacher. Mention me is the same root as lehizkartani, to remember. And mention me to Pharaoh, and you will get me out of this house. You will get me out of this house 2 times? No, that's 2 years, son. There he, Joseph, solved the dreams of Pharaoh's servants, said in Genesis 41:12. ושם איתנו נער עברי, עבד לשר הטבחים, ונספר לו ויפתר לנו את חלומותינו. איש כחלומו פתר. And there he was with us, a Hebrew lad, a slave of the chief slaughterer, and we told him, and he interpreted our dreams for us. For each of us, he interpreted according to his dream, for each man according to his dream. And he solved them, says Pirkei de Rabbi Eliezer, so it was, as said in verse 13, Vayehi kasher patar lanu ken haya. And it came to pass that just as he had interpreted, so it was. Our sages say that it is unbecoming of a son of Jacob, and one who is going to be the king of the world, to rely on the mercies or remembrances of man. We understand this, right? It wasn't a punishment for Joseph. It was you almost got there to perfection. We just got to take off whatever that was. The prison will give you time to focus on what you need to focus on. You remove the klipot, and now guess what, Joseph? You're ready to be king of the world. Okay. So Joseph needed just a little bit more refinement before he became the most powerful man in the world, and that was in Genesis 41:1. It came to pass at the end of 2 full years, Vayhi miketz shnatayim yamim. 2 full years from when? From when the request was made. You see, that's the only mention of these extra 2 years, and how important it was that it is mentioned, because why was he there for those extra 2 years? And again, the timing was perfect. Like we said in our class, actually we'll get into it in a second. So, by the way, the word ketz, end, it gives a tremendous hint over here. This is it. As God is setting the stage for Jacob to prepare his descent to Egypt. The numerical value of the word ketz, kuf, tzadik, is 190. And that is the numbers of years that God took off for Israel to be in Egypt, right? God said 400 years your descendants will be there. 400, take off 190, you get 210, the exact number of years that Israel was in Egypt. And only 86 to 87. It was, again, it started at 87 years. Miriam was born in the 86th year, right? In other words, she was conceived in the 87th year, counting down, and she was 3 years older than Aaron, and she was 6 years older than Moses. So Moses was 80 when he got the call. Miriam was 86. 9 months before that, we're already in the 87th year. So between 86 and 87 years of those were the complete servitude years in Egypt. And the interesting thing, and I told you this before, so if you take it from the time that Miriam was born, that's 86, and where it says that Israel came out chamushim, but we know that only a fifth came out, 86 times 5 gets to 430. From the exact time where God gave Abraham the prophecy, Abraham was 70 years old. Another 30 years to the birth of Isaac, and that's when the 400 years started ticking down. So 86 times 5 comes down to 430 exact years. All this is very cool stuff. All right. And Joseph saw Pharaoh's dream while Ruach HaKodesh was hovering upon him. Kashel shalta halav Ruach HaKodesh. Ruach HaKodesh, as we say, or, elsewhere they like to call it Holy Spirit. I don't even like, it's true, but I don't even like saying it because it's like it's already been corrupt over there. It doesn't dwell inside you. It hovers atop of you. Big difference. Maybe over there it does. As said in verse 38, so Pharaoh said to his servants, will we find anyone like this man in whom there is the Spirit of God? And he knew all the languages. And it was, now look at this. Jasher helps us understand over here as far as how we got to all the languages. These are the 70 tongues from the generations of dispersion. And it was their custom throughout the land of Egypt that every man who came to speak to the king, if he was a prince or if he was one of the one that was estimable in the sight of the king, he ascended to the king's throne as far as the 31st step. There were 70 steps, very specifically, one for each tongue spoken. And the king would descend to the 36th step and speak with him. So there was still a gap between them. And again, this is if it was another king or another prince or if someone that the king gave honor to. And if it was one of the common people, he ascended to the 3rd step. And the king would descend to the 4th, meaning from the top, and speak to him. And their custom was, moreover, that any man who understood to speak in all 70 languages, he ascended the 70 steps and went up and spoke till he reached the king. Meaning, every step he had to speak another language until you get to all 70, and then you're in the level of the king. And any man who could not complete the 70, he ascended as many steps as the languages which he knew how to speak. And it was customary in those days in Egypt that no one should reign over them, but who understood to speak in the 70 languages. Okay, so this is what it says, right? Now understand this. Pharaoh himself knew 69 of the languages, okay? But he did not know Hebrew, though he pretended he did. No one's going to question Pharaoh, and we're going to get soon to just how Pharaoh became Pharaoh. Later, when Pharaoh wanted to place Joseph as viceroy over Egypt, all his ministers protested because he was a despicable Hebrew slave after all, right? He solved his dream. He says, Hayesh ish kazeh, is there a man like this with the Spirit of God? No. So everything he says, and they said exactly what they said. So the Pharaoh's ministers, they wisely invoked their 70 languages rule, to which Pharaoh reluctantly agreed to, as it was their custom. Still. And now we're going to continue from Jasher. And on that night, the Lord sent one of his ministering angels. This would be Gabriel, right? And he came into the land of Egypt unto Joseph. And the angel of the Lord stood over Joseph And behold, Joseph was lying in the bed at night in his master's house in the dungeon, for his master had put him back into the dungeon on account of his wife. In other words, okay, you solved Pharaoh's dreams, but you're not free just yet. And the angel aroused him from his sleep, and Joseph rose and stood upon his legs, and behold, the angel of the Lord was standing opposite him, and the angel of the Lord spoke with Joseph. And he taught him all the languages of man in that night, and he called his name Yehoseph. Now, I'm also going to give you a little extra something off the books here, okay? This is from Chesed LaAvraham, from Rabbi Avraham Ozulai. He was a Kabbalist from about 450 years ago who lived in Morocco. Incredible wisdom, this guy. All right. So from his book, he writes this. Pharaoh, and I mean, this, I'm giving you my thing, but I'm going to explain what he said, basically. Pharaoh, as we know, he was no dummy. In fact, he only got to where he was being the wisest and most successful man in Egypt, right? They don't want an idiot to rule over them. They want a guy who speaks the languages. They want a guy who actually understands the dark magic, and the guy who could basically handle himself. They obviously wanted the most powerful person because then people would contend with him, right? Okay. So how did Pharaoh actually get there and retain his position as Pharaoh? There is a secret in the materials. As we know, everything has its own spiritual properties. The specific stones that were on the breastplate of the Kohen, gold and silver, copper, everything has its own spiritual properties, as well as linen. It says in the Torah, shatnez, you shouldn't mix wool and linen. So the secret that Pharaoh figured out, because he was wise, is in the material that we wear, particularly linen. These are the garments that the high priest was wearing, right? The Kohen Gadol was wearing when he entered into the Holy of Holies, pure linen and nothing else. He didn't have all his garb with all the stones and all the gold and silver. No, it was just white linen, pure white linen. Okay, but this would only come later, right? That where God commanded them to put on the high priest the linen. But when you wear linen, and this is also applicable to today, people, if you want to take notes, check this out. When you wear linen, no curse can or will ever rest upon you, nor any evil eye, nor evil spirit, nor any form of witchcraft can harm you if you are wearing pure linen. This, of course, is not relevant to God because he does what he wants. If God wants to handle you, linen is not going to protect you from God if you have it coming. The thing is, this only works if this is the only material of clothing that you have on your body. Even a single thread of a different material will cancel this. So pure linen, made of linen, sewn of linen, just linen, that's it. And I think it's, if I'm not mistaken, white. Just that's it. Pharaoh knew this, which is why that is all he wore. I know they're showing the Pharaoh, but this Pharaoh, other pharaohs with the headdress and the gold and this and that's whatever. Pharaoh, Joseph's Pharaoh, wore exclusively white linen, that pure, because he knew this. And this is also how he convinced his magicians that he was a god. He told them, hit me with your best shot, right? Go ahead, start cursing me, conjure up whatever, and watch. I am a god. Nothing is going to affect me. So they did. They conjured all the magic that they knew, but it absolutely did not affect him. So they're like, yo, okay, king, no problem. But Joseph knew this as well, because this is Joseph, right? Which is why that was all that he wore when he got out of the dungeon. Joseph knew that Pharaoh knew this, but Pharaoh didn't know that Joseph did. Which is why Pharaoh gave Joseph a golden necklace, as we can see in the text in Genesis 41:42. Look what it says. And Pharaoh removed his ring from his hand and placed it on Joseph's hand, and he attired him with raiment of fine linen. Here's your linen. And he placed the golden chain around his neck. This chain was meant to weaken Joseph and keep him in check, so Joseph So Joseph, being wiser than Pharaoh, played along. He goes, "Oh, thank you, king. This is amazing." And he only wore it in public. But the moment that he entered into his private residence, he removed it and only remained with the pure linen on his body. Amazing stuff. Yehoseph, his name became Yehoseph, to increase, as God just gave Joseph a massive upgrade. You understand this, people, okay? And later on also I'm so sorry. We're going to see in the blessings how and we know this also, we've learned this before, that the evil eye cannot touch Joseph. And this is another reason why he understood what can actually not only remove, but completely protect you from the evil eye. And that is the secret in pure white, 100% linen. So remember, God sent Gabriel to set all these things in motion. Right in the very beginning, the whole story is about Joseph, is about judgment, right? So he sent Gabriel to start this thing out. Gabriel's the one that took him to his brothers. Remember, Joseph said, "I'm looking for my brothers. What do you want? What you want to reign? You want to do a tikkun? I want to find my brothers." Okay, they're there, but let me tell you something. They're not where you're at. They're not seeking to have peace with you. Yeah, send me to the brothers. He just heard in the physical sense. He ignored the spiritual sense. That's why Joseph had to be refined in order to become king. So God sent Gabriel from the beginning to handle the judgment. What? He's not going to see this through? "Will I bring to the birth stool and not cause to give birth, says the Lord? Am I not he who causes to give birth? Should I now shut the womb, says your God?" In Isaiah 66:9. You see everything that's going on. God started it and God is going to finish it. Hear what I'm saying, people. Everything that is going on, God started it. God is doing everything. It may seem, yes, they're doing it and they're doing it and they're bad guys, and that who sends these bad guys? We know this, but we cannot forget it. That's the difference. You can direct your anger, but it's not anger. You can direct vengeance, right? Because of what they did. Absolutely. There are things that we have to do according to the Torah. We are commanded to destroy Amalek. If someone comes to kill us, we are commanded to rise before them and wipe them out, which is something that we're not really doing right now. Otherwise, we even have halachot of how do you lay siege to a city. What do you do when the aggressors, you come to make peace with them? If they don't want to make peace, you lay siege over there. You cut off their food, you cut off their water. Let them rot, let them starve, let them die. This is how we were told, according to God in the 5 books of Moses, to go to war. It's not what we're doing right now because we are a nation like the rest of the nations. But if we did according to God did, not a single soldier would die. Okay. So, anyway, God started it and he is going to finish it. So he says in Isaiah 44:6, "So said the Lord, the King of Israel and its Redeemer, the Lord of hosts. I am first and I am last, and besides me there is no God." Sometimes God has to remind us what we may have forgotten, but we know this in our very souls. "And who will call that is he like me, and will tell it and arrange it for me? Since my placing the eternal people," it's Israel, "and the signs and those that will come, let them tell for themselves." Oh, really? You want to tell me what's going to come? Go ahead. Go ahead, false prophet. Tell me what's going to be. Are we worried? God already told us what's going to happen. We are not worried. And why are we not worried? "Fear not and be not dismayed. Did I not let you hear it from then? And I told it, and you are my witnesses." You all heard this. We have all the books, right? "Is there a God besides me? And there is no rock I did not know." The creator and grand architect of all space, time, and reality. Is there anything he does not know? That's where we fall. No one is doing anything to you. This is all from God. I just read the 3 verses in a row from Isaiah 44, 6, 7, and 8. There is your answer. Read that every day if you feel like, what's going on? Read it and go, oh, God, you did this? You got it? Cool. I trust in you. You started this. You put me in this. You're going to get me through this. What do we need to do? All we need to do. Faith and trust. Emunah, bitachon. Okay, it says it right there. Believe that. You think it's simple. Oh, well, that's it. No, it's not that simple, obviously. It takes a whole lifestyle of Torah to get there, but we start one step at a time, and God will see us through. Let's continue. So, Joseph knew all the tongues, and furthermore, when he went out to the marketplace, he saw all the peoples made up of groups and sects, each group speaking according to their language, and he knew what everyone was saying, as said in Psalms 81:6. Edut beYehosef shemo betzeito al eretz Mitzrayim, sfat lo yadati yishma. As a testimony for Yehosef, he ordained it when he went forth over the land of Egypt, when I understood a language that I had not known, because Gabriel taught him all the 70 languages. So when he was going out there in the marketplace, all of a sudden, this group saying, first of all, these are the groups he understood according to their tongues, right? As Joseph, all he knew before that, when he was just Joseph, all he knew was Hebrew and perhaps a bit of whatever the dominant language was in Egypt at the time. He did, after all, spend a year in Potiphar's house and then another 12 years in prison. So even a regular dude spending 12, 13 years in a foreign land, you're going to pick up some of the language, right? I mean, you will. Right, so that's how he could communicate with Pharaoh also. But Yehosef knew them all. It helps to have absolute power when you know everything that all your constituents are saying, plotting, scheming, especially when they don't think that anyone else understands or is even listening. No one is hearing what we're saying, plotting or scheming. Seriously, what's the difference? When you know who is saying what, you can easily navigate and whatever challenges you might be facing as a ruling body. You see what I'm saying? When it's a good leader like Joseph, the world becomes a utopia. And when it's today's leaders, we are on the brink of nuclear war. You ever speak to your phone when it's not on and say you're interested in whatever, and then all of a sudden you see those ads popping up? Put it in flight mode. It doesn't matter. Okay, so 24-hour surveillance, you absolutely, don't worry, your end is coming soon. I hope you know this. There's nothing that you can do to us that's going to change what's going to happen to you. Okay? All right. Anyway, in addition to this, when Joseph was riding in his chariot all throughout the borders of Egypt, because again, he's an incredible leader, incredibly wise, an incredible tactician, and in order for him to save the world, he was now setting up his base of operations. He needed to know every inch of the land, what good, what bad, what ugly, everything. So when Joseph was riding his chariot all throughout the borders of Egypt, and the Egyptian girls would run alongside him on top of the walls, they would throw their gold rings at him so that perchance he might look at them and he would see their beauty and their figure, but nobody's eye degraded him. Classy. At least they weren't, gold rings and not plastic beads. But our sages say that the chariot wasn't actually open. It wasn't a convertible. It was a hardtop, okay? And they would hope that he would look at their beauty and then, based on their physical appearance, he'd be like, oh, I need to marry that one over there. But our boy Joseph, he don't play that, right? Not especially after the 13 years in prison that he spent. The way the overwhelming majority of society goes about it today is the same as back then. Look at me. Well, what do you have to offer? This. Great. Look, she's got it too, and her too, and that one, and all of y'all. But how long is that going to last, and then for what? What is your selling point today? Right? What does Eshet Chayil say, for goodness sakes? שקר החן והבל היופי. אישה יראת אדוני היא תתהלל. Right? The lie of chen, of grace, and hevel, the vanity of beauty. But a woman who fears God, Hititalal, she will be praised. This is really what it comes down to. People, how long do we actually have on earth right now? I mean, and even if we did live full lives, how long do we actually have left? You see what I'm saying? This is crunch time, baby. There's no more time to play around right now. As he was highly esteemed in the eyes of everyone. Okay, as said in Genesis 49:22, and this is also in the blessing of Jacob, Ben Porat Yosef, Ben Porat Alei Ain, for the evil eye, Banot Tza'ada Alei Shul. A charming son is Joseph, a son charming to the eye. This is one of the things he warded off the evil eye. Of a son charming to the eye of the women, each one strode along to see him. That's exactly what happened. Now, who do you think sent the girls up there to begin with? Let's say Joseph didn't necessarily announce that he was there. Sure, you saw a royal thing going, but you don't know who's in there because he didn't want people to see him. So who sent the girls up there? How would they know that Joseph was actually coming? Because he's running by there in a chariot. What's going on? This was the girls' fathers. Most likely the ministers and high-ranking officials. They'd have inside information. Yo, Joseph, he's coming by the east wall today. You make sure you get up there. I'm going to fill your fingers with gold rings, and you throw those rings. You get that attention. And when he looks up, get his attention even more. Right? So, who wouldn't want the Viceroy of Egypt as their son-in-law? But when they saw that he didn't look at anyone, meaning not only these princes and these other ministers, but Pharaoh, when they saw that he did not look at any women, Pharaoh gave Joseph his request for a wife. Who was his request for a wife? As we had discussed, that was none other than Osnat, who was his niece, Dinah's daughter from the house of Jacob. She was already meant for him from the beginning. And all the peoples of the tongues came to buy food, and they paid tribute or taxes to Joseph. And he spoke to every people according to their language. Therefore he was called Turgeman, translator. So if this is the case, then that gave away his position, right? Meaning they would know not to speak in front of him since he knew all their languages, right? So, okay, there goes well, now he can't be spying on us, right? But wait, he didn't learn these tongues through any kind of natural process, obviously. He didn't sit there in Ulpan saying, okay, shalom, eifo lalechet lasherutim. It wasn't like that. That's not how he learned 70 tongues. He could speak to every single person around the world, right? But rather, so long as he had Ruach HaKodesh, and we know he had it throughout his entire life, this is how he knew what they were saying. But when he spoke as though it was his native tongue. You understand? With all the nuances and all the slang that was unique to each people. So it's not that he knew the languages. It came from within. It came from everyone felt comfortable with him. When you could speak to somebody in their native tongue, in their, like sometimes you see these videos where it's fun. You'll see like a total white dude go to some place in China, and all of a sudden he'll start, belting out Mandarin, and it'll scare everybody. And they're like, he's just going, but he speaks like he's from there. And all of a sudden they become immediately comfortable with him. And they are very, very welcoming to him because they see it as such an honor that a foreigner not only speaks their language, but he gets their language. You understand? There's a different story. Everybody loved Joseph at the end of the day. He saved the world. And this is also how he did it. And yet still, that's not the impressive part at all. If you guys have not been on the floor impressed with Joseph. The really impressive part is that Joseph knew what they were saying even when he wasn't there. If you have Ruach HaKodesh, you don't have to hear what the person is saying to know what they're saying, to know what they're thinking. Meaning he knew what every single person was about and what resided behind everyone's words. So he could connect to everyone. Again, he wasn't looking to be a dictator. He was looking to be a savior according to the will of God. And the best leaders, which again, they don't exist today, but back in the day, if you look at Joseph, if you look at David, if you look at Moses and Aaron, the leaders of Israel, they got down with their people. What's up, buddy? How you doing? You're talking to me? Aaron, high priest of Israel, who goes into the Holy of Holies, the chose. Hey, what do you want with me? Dude, how's it going? You know, like, all right, you do. How your class is doing? I noticed you didn't. I'm doing Mark. Say hi to your mother for me, okay? You know, it's like he got down with the people, right? These are the leaders. They're one of the people. David did not sleep under the roof of a house for the first 28 years of his life. 28 years. Why do you think it says Mashiach is going to be one of the people? Mashiach is not a great rabbi. Mashiach is not a great leader. Mashiach is one of the people. Why? So he can connect with all the people. Joseph, remember, Joseph needed to be humbled. He was the golden child of Jacob. He didn't really work. He looked over his brothers as they were shepherding in the house of Jacob. But he was the one that sat down with his father and learned Torah. God said, listen. And then he came out and said, hey, I had these dreams. Yeah, I'm probably going to rule over you. You might be right. But some humility is in order. So God took him from where he was as a 17-year-old boy. And he took him down to the house, to Egypt, to the house of Potiphar, false claims, prison, dungeon, 2 more years of prison. And then finally, when he was ready, and his superpower was the ability to connect with every single person on an individual level. These are the kind of leaders that we need today in the world. These are the kind of leaders that we need in Israel. We know that this cannot happen. The whole political system is set up for that cannot happen. How is it that all the politicians, the moment they get into politics, elected officials by the people, all of a sudden they become multimillionaires? How is this happening? Well, you think they're connecting to the people? They don't care about the people. Obviously. I'm not only talking about the states, I'm talking about here in Israel too. Everywhere. This whole system has to fall apart so that the highest position in the land, the king, could come down to every individual and say, what's up, buddy? I love you. I want to see you. Let's hang out. What's going on? You understand? That's what this is about. It's that personal level. I went off. Sorry. Okay, so yes, he understood their essence, and that is what is impressive. So, some were buying food on account of the famine in their houses, and others came to buy food, and one would ask the other, what is the market price? Okay, so the language is peculiar, but it's almost a literal translation from Hebrew. Why would it specifically mention the famine in their houses? One would come to buy food for the famine in their houses, and the other would come to buy food. Okay? Shouldn't it just fall under the account of coming to buy food in general? Yes, but why does Rabbi Eliezer specifically give us this breakdown? The bottom line is, and we're going to see this in a minute, is yes, it all is under the same account. But for some, it was very personal, such as the heads of the households who needed to feed their families. My wife and my children and my sheep are hungry. I'm coming to buy food. I need this. And for others, it was a business, as you would have leaders or landowners or other princes and ministers seeking food in order to maintain their kingdoms. Okay? So is it not personal for them? There are a lot more people under them. Yes, but it really goes where, okay, well, I got to make sure that I'm taken care of, and then all my wealth. But it wasn't about wealth anymore. God is about to humble the entire world here. By the way, he's about to do it again. I hope you guys see that, right? Wait for that market crash. In fact, look on the news right now. I'm just throw some things out there right now just so you understand what's happening. For instance, here we go. China, if you actually follow China, and we know that since Bill Clinton made that open trade agreement with China and the U.S. started losing billions and China bought up half the U.S., Trump said, you know what, China? No, we're done. No more money for China because the U.S. debt to China grew to ridiculous amounts you could never pay it back in 1,000 lifetimes. So they just canceled it. So needless to say, China and America, they're not friends right now. So China's got it in for America. All right. Even when I was living in the States, when I was living in Vegas, the Chinese were buying up half of Vegas, the most expensive properties, the hotels, everything. They were just buying it up because they could. China today, within a few short years, the entire country is going to collapse. They're going to have a complete and utter economic collapse. What always comes after an economic collapse, or right before it's about to happen? It's inevitable. War. Because if not, there's no more China. So listen, we got military might, we got a bunch of nukes, aircraft carriers, a million-man standing army. Let's put it to good use. Okay, that's one thing. The other thing, right now, the inflation is so ridiculously high in the United States, soon the dollar is going to be meaningless. The whole world is about to collapse, right? That's the other thing. Guys from our group 2015, after 2015, the reserve currency of the world was no longer the US dollar. There is no reserve currency in the world right now. Once upon a time, remember, green was king, and then it was euros. Everything is falling apart right now. War is inevitable. In addition to obviously seeing how World War III is inevitable. We got nuclear subs off of Israel right now, at least 2 aircraft carriers, another dozen warships. Why do we have all that? China's sending their fleet. I mean, we're headed, we're already in war, but wait till the big booms start to fly. So again, this is inevitable. God is going to destroy the whole world economically, just like he did here in Egypt. Everything is happening again and again and again, just on a grander scale. So let's see how Joseph handled it, shall we? Okay. So you have, on the personal level, I need to feed my family. And on the other level is, I need to maintain my kingdom. Watch how God brings everybody down to the same level. So then, and what do we read that it said? It said, and one would ask the other, what is the market price? In other words, how much are you paying for food or for the bag of grain or whatever it was, right? And the father would ask the minister and vice versa, what are you paying? Now, what did Joseph know that they didn't know, aside from everything? That there was enough food. There was enough food for everyone, but only if Joseph was in charge of the distribution and in charge of the entire operation, right? Which is why he was selling the same amount at the same price across the board. Okay? And these were all small amounts also. No more, it said no more than a donkey can carry per person. Okay? In other words, you could come in, each person could come in with a donkey. That's it. Why would he do this? Pirkei Rabbi Eliezer says, and when they would come to Joseph, he would tell them, you heard correctly. And this is in order not to break the market. Because then the super wealthy would buy up all the grain, right? And sell it at a higher price, thereby creating imbalance in a time of crisis. Just like what they're doing right now. War pigs create the war, create the deficit, buy up the entire globe because everybody is going bankrupt. Now, after the war is over, everybody wants to come home, continue with their life. They can't afford their houses anymore. Why? Guess what? 9 families own the entire world. Read history. I'm not making this stuff up. We already had 2 world wars that this happened in. It's not capitalism, okay? It's greed. And people's lives were on the line back then, fairly recent, and now again. In fact, the entire world was at stake, and no one understood this better than Joseph. It's called Yosef HaTzadik. Who are the people that we are called to be judges and officers in Israel? Tzadikim, righteous people, who cannot stand money and power, who run away from money and power. Like we said, the Sanhedrin, these were those people. Politicians, they campaign, vote for me. You think the Sanhedrin campaigned, vote for me? No, they were the people that studied Torah that said, leave me alone. I want to focus on Torah. Said, that's the guy. Put him on the seat. L'shem shamayim, for the sake of heaven, I'm going to do this. These are the people. Who are the people running the world? Quite the literal polar opposites of these people. which is why he was personally overseeing every transaction. Joseph, knowing exactly who got what and what went where. Joseph, he knew everything. He remembered everything. Could you imagine, God forbid, a scenario like this today in the world, knowing that there is more than enough food for everyone, but those in charge were our current governments? God forbid that this should happen. You would lose almost 9 billion people. Guess what? It's by design they're trying to do it, but you would. This is absolutely how it would go. Well, if they have their way, you won't have to imagine it at all, because that's it. In fact, they're planning this, okay? Create a crisis, one that only they have the solution to, right? Call it a virus of unknown origins or whatnot. And so, if you want to eat, sure. If you want a roof over your head, if you want to remain alive, you know what's great? Let's put you to work. In work camps, for instance, right? If you want to remain alive because you can't call a state like that's living, then you will have to submit. You're not living if you're completely submitted, if you have no freedom, right? Then you will have to submit your entire being to your overlords. Or, as the World Economic Forum, led by that Nazi Schwab, said, I'm not even joking, you will own nothing and you will be happy. Well, that was more Russian. And you will be happy. That's still Russian. Whatever, in a German accent. Okay? This is no joke, kids. This is for real. He said this. And again, this is also what we call Agenda 2030. If you think I'm making things up, Google right now, World Economic Forum, Google Agenda 2030. They moved it to 2025. Okay, don't worry. This is not going to happen. God's taking them apart. Don't worry. But this is what they want to do. You see how everything is repeating itself in a negative way. From here, our sages say that anyone who breaks the market will never see a blessing. In other words, you try to monopolize, try to do what all these corporations have been doing and are doing together with governments. Governments aren't government. People don't get elected. People get positioned. People get placed. I hope you guys see that already. And if not, don't worry. God is systematically tearing the universe apart. And you will see the truth. So we already know how it's going to end for them. Now, don't we? Now, don't we? We know how it's going to end for you, right? You listening? Of course you are. The Hebrew says, siman bracha le'olam, okay? When it says, never see a blessing. They will never see siman bracha le'olam. This can also be understood as a sign of blessing forever, meaning anybody that tries to break or manipulate the market like this for their own personal gain. Meaning, though you might think that you are gaining at first, because they think they're in control, these idiots, whatever you seemingly get out of it will only last you in this world and not beyond this world. The same concept as God giving the wicked their reward in this world. Why? Because in the world to come, as in eternity, they will have nothing. What does God call crooked business practices? He calls it an abomination, to'eva. It's disgusting. That's why the banking system, the taxation, the governments, and every system in this world will not stand. Not in the world of truth, because they are all lies. Now, what's the opposite of a blessing, of an eternal blessing? You might be thinking a curse, but wait, that's too good for them. What did God tell Abraham? Genesis 12:3. Va'avarecha mevarechecha umekallelecha aor. And I will bless those who bless you, and those who curse you, I will damn. It doesn't say I will curse. It didn't say umekallelecha akalel. Aor, from arur, as in arur ata mikol chayat hasadeh. Damned are you from any beast of the field, said God to the serpent. You're not coming back from that. Ahul Knaan. Canaan is damned, not cursed. You could still undo a curse. You could still come back from a curse. But from damnation, that's sealed right there. Your fate is sealed. It is done for you. It won't end well for them or anyone who supports them. Rabbi Tanchum said, Joseph commanded, and they built treasuries in every city and city. Yes, I said treasuries. And he gathered all the grain of the nations into the treasuries. Now, why, pray tell, would you store your grain in a treasury, meaning in a vault? Because food, hey, listen to me now, people. I'm telling you something straight. Because food is about to become the most valuable commodity in the known world. Okay? Okay. And even that's going to run out because we don't have Joseph running the things yet. And storing them in any place other than a vault, where back then, storing them in any place other than a vault with massive doors and armed guard would end in catastrophe. That's why he stored the food in a vault. And it would have, if not every last person in the world was taken care of properly. There would still be a revolt. Otherwise, the people would have stormed the storehouses for food, even if it means that they would get killed, because what do they have to lose? I'm about to die of hunger. My family's about to die of hunger. We're just going to go for it, right? What have we got to lose? Now, this happened, by the way, during the 10 plagues, but that's because Egypt was under different management, as we know. Behold, came a new king who didn't know Joseph, right? So what happened back then? Pharaoh, the Pharaoh of the Exodus, he kept the whole thing for himself. So the Egyptians who were hungry, they were trying to storm the grain houses and the storehouses for food, and they were killing one another. The other reason these treasuries or these storehouses were built in the city centers was that this way everybody could see what is going on. That's full transparency, you see? So they won't even think that they are not only being played by their government, by Joseph, but rather that everyone and everything was done openly and honestly, while everyone was essentially watching everyone. If someone would go and steal, another person from there would stop them, right? It's open over there. Okay, genius, Joseph. And the Egyptians would mock him, meaning Joseph, obviously before they knew anything that was coming and before they knew also really who Joseph was. As far as they were concerned, he was just a Hebrew slave who was given the keys to the kingdom, and now he's changing everything around, undoing their traditions, away against the ways that the things were done beforehand. This guy, so he solved a dream, big deal. Now we got to live with this guy. Wait. As they would say, now the worm will eat all the treasures of Joseph. Imagine how they felt when eventually they sold themselves to him as slaves for saving their lives. This we saw. Once the money ran out, what are you going to do? Take us as slaves. Okay. But no worm had any power over them, meaning over the food. Neither did the treasuries, listen to me now, neither did the treasuries diminish until the day he died. How could this be that the food did not even diminish? Okay. Do you understand the miracle here? Joseph did indeed gather enough food to feed the entire known world for 7 whole years without a single person going hungry. That within itself is a miracle that it succeeded. That within itself is an absolute complete siyata d'shmaya. It is a miracle, no doubt. Oh, wait. What about all those who mocked Joseph? You know what they saw? That no matter how much grain was taken out for all the people, not only of Egypt, but Egypt ruled the world because of this. There was a famine in Israel. That's why Jacob sent his children down to Egypt. Go get some food or else we're all dead over here. And so did all the rest of the nations in the known world. No matter how much grain was taken out, the levels never dropped. What? How is this possible? How is this possible? The same way it was done during the days of Elijah in 1 Kings 17. She went and did as Elijah had said, and she and her household ate many days. The pitcher of flour did not end, neither did the flask of oil diminish, as the word of the Lord which he had spoken through Elijah. If you prepare the vessel, and you have faith, and you are working with God, you did your hishtadlut, right? And yet another example, within the same concept, like we actually discussed probably a few months ago, in 2 Kings 19, after King Hezekiah of Judah did everything he possibly could. He brought the people back to God, he shattered all the altars, destroyed all the statues, all of Israel did tshuva, then he expanded the walls of Israel, he fortified the city, he diverted the water flow, he set up the defenses, he did everything he possibly could. He was a good king. Then Sennacherib's 1,000,000-man army marches on Jerusalem. If you go one for one, they were going to completely destroy them, even just if they kept them under siege, even with the water over there. A volley of arrows every day would have killed who knows how many thousands. Everything Hezekiah did in the physical world would not be able to withstand the Assyrian assault that they brought against Jerusalem. It didn't matter what he did. All those things, if it was just matters of this world, you're done. But they didn't have to. Just like Abraham didn't need an army to destroy the 4 kings, only recognizing that God is his helper through the name Eliezer and his 318 men. 318 is the gematria, is the numerical value of Eliezer. God is my helper. With God as my helper, I will destroy everything. And what did he have? He had sand through sand turned into spears and javelins and swords. Why did God not let the grain levels diminish? Even though they could have diminished and still everybody would have been fed. Though it was not even necessary to get the job done. Why? Why did God do this? What does this show us? Hear this for today, people, okay? It's relevant. You're going to need this. If we truly do our best and believe that God is the one who grants us success, we could do our best. Our success and failures entirely depends on God. That's it. If we understand that God is the one who allows us to succeed, then not only will we succeed, especially if we're walking on God's path, but we will glorify God's name in the process. You see, and that's what everything is about. By doing so, we elevate the world. But no worm had any power over them, neither did the treasuries diminish until the day that Joseph died, because he did according to God's will, with humility and with absolute faith and trust. Therefore, they called his name Chalkol, as said in Genesis 47:12, and Joseph sustained his father and his brothers and his father's entire household with bread according to the young children. Vayechalkel Yosef et aviv et echav ve'et kol beit aviv lechem lefi hataf. Joseph, the code breaker, tzofnat pa'anach. Joseph, the translator, Tulgeman. Joseph, the sustainer, hamechalkel. And all this was done for God's name's sake. Now, my friends, we are not expected to, nor can we even possibly begin to attain the levels of the faith of Abraham, the wisdom of Joseph, the resources of Hezekiah, the Holy Spirit of Elijah. It's not happening for us. But we don't need that. That's the point. They had it. And we are a continuation of them. They are the ones that dug these paths for us to receive the benefit. We just have to walk in the paths that they did. We are called to use whatever resources we have wisely through faith and trust that God knows who we are and that he sees what it is that we do. God sees, God knows. Remember, you don't need to impress any other living soul. Only God. That is what gives us the most powerful and relevant tool. And this is trust. Every generation, within every era, within every millennia, has their own tikkun, their own rectification to make. Every generation. Ours, right now, ours, meaning the last generation, ours is not anything that has ever been that anyone had to go through before, because we're currently in a time unlike any other. We are in the most difficult time, and yet the most incredible time in the history of the world. And our one task, just one, make this easy for you, just one task to focus on is trust in God and not in man. That's it. That's our task. Trust in God and not in man. Do your hishtadlut. Do the best you can. Of course, you have to keep working. No, well, you work. God said you go to work, you go to work. Well, you're not going to learn Torah, you learn Torah, you pray. You live to the best of your ability with the full awareness right now that God sees exactly what you're doing. And he's going to get you through it. But don't think that God is not going to help you with this trust, because he will. As he, like we said, he is systematically removing everything and anything that we can lay our trust upon. You trust your government? Faith in government? Not anymore. Example. See what happens. You trust in your police force, your military, the health system, your mayor, your doctor. No, nobody. This is a mercy from God, because at the end, we are going to get to the point, whether we like it or not, by default, as we keep on reading from the end of Masechet Sotah, that we have no one to lean on. En al mili she'en ella al avinu shebashamayim. We have no one to lean on and to put our faith on, but in our Father in heaven. Say it with me now. Ein od milvado. There is no one but God. And that's our class for today. Thank you so much for joining me. On Tuesday, it is Rosh Chodesh, Kislev. Rosh Chodesh Kislev. Okay, so have a Chodesh Tov and have a Shabbat Shalom. I'll see y'all next time, God willing. Bye-bye.